qualify. You need to make sure that you have the right people around you, the right people giving the right advice. So don't get your financial advice from TikTok, don't get it from LinkedIn, don't get it from Facebook. Get it from a qualified broker that you know, that you trust, someone who knows and understands your personal circumstances. Because there are no two homes that are exactly the same, there are no two buyers that are exactly the same, and there are no two deals that are exactly the same. Last year, I had a friend of mine who was looking to purchase, and she was convinced that she wouldn't qualify for a mortgage. This is despite the fact that she had been saving. She had a considerable amount for a deposit. She was managing her finances well. She was doing all of the things right. At some point in her experience, someone had told her that it would be really hard for her to get a mortgage. It wasn't based on her individual circumstances, it was just one of those things that people say. Just like the conversation that is happening both in the US and the UK around how difficult it is to get on the housing ladder. Now, that may be true for some people and less true for other people. So this individual, this friend of mine, she was told that it would be very difficult for her to find a home. We were talking about it and I said, well, let's do this. Let's look at your finances. When we looked at them, as I said, she had a good amount in savings. What she was looking to purchase was within her means. She'd been at her job for a while. So I said, let's get you an agreement in principle. Let's start there. So we ran an application, got her an agreement in principle, and an agreement in principle is essentially a bank saying that based on this cursory information that you've provided, we'd be willing to lend you X amount. We got that agreement in principle. She took that, and based on what the bank said they would lend to her, she started looking for homes. It took her about 3-4 months. She found a couple of homes that she was interested in. She allowed me to negotiate the deal for her, so I dealt directly with the estate agents. Some of them didn't go through. Some of them, the estate agents or the seller was looking for more than my client was willing to spend. But long story short, she ended up finding a home that she loved, that was within her budget and was where she wanted it to be. She completed about 2 months ago. So the moral of this story is don't just listen to what people tell you. If you're ready to buy and you're in a good financial situation, or you feel that you may be, just speak to a mortgage broker. Speak to someone that can review your finances, that can look at your profile, look at the deals that are out there, and give you some options. Then you can look at those options and decide if they fit your need.
Depending on who you speak to in your personal circumstances, getting a mortgage is either really easy or really hard. Today, I am going to answer your questions with no selling, no pressure, and just factual information. My name is Anthony Lindsay, and I'll also be talking about my new book and an exciting in-person mortgage masterclass. So watch to the end, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and put your questions in the chat. So, as I said, my name is Anthony Lindsay, and I've been in finance for over 30 years. I know you wouldn't know it by looking at me. I've done everything from debt management to wealth management to mortgages and lending. And as always, when we're talking about mortgages, do remember your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up your repayments. Regardless of how you look at it, you have to remember that getting a mortgage is just math. Don't take it personally. Don't be emotional. The bank is not out to get you, and they are not your enemy. It's going to come down to some simple things. It comes down to what I call CID. So your credit score, your income, and your deposit. We'll be talking about this in a lot more detail a little bit later. But one of the big mistakes that people make when looking for a mortgage is not going to a mortgage broker. Now, I'm not saying that because I am a mortgage broker. I'm just saying it because going to a mortgage broker is going to give you more choice, because mortgage brokers are going to work with more than one lender. I've been a bank manager at all the big brands in the UK, HSBC, Lloyds, TSB. And one thing that I know, no matter how well my staff were trained, when they're speaking to clients, they could only speak to clients about the products that we sold. Going to a mortgage broker is going to give you more choice, that they can find a lender that matches your needs and your circumstances. I do also find that you get a higher level of service from mortgage brokers, because mortgage brokers are reliant on referrals. When you walk into a bank and you speak to a mortgage broker or a mortgage advisor, you are trading on the bank's reputation. So you've already gone in there and you want to do business with them. With a broker, you're probably not going to work with them unless they were referred by someone or you see great reviews. Not to mention that when you speak to a broker, they'll give you advice around your protection. So that would be insurance and wills. Who's involved with getting a mortgage? You have your broker, your estate agent, and your solicitor. Always remember that the estate agent is not your friend. No matter how nice they are, the estate agent works for the seller. The estate agent has a responsibility to get the seller the highest price possible. And you'll also need a solicitor. Do not cut corners with your solicitor. Quite often, I find that people will look for the cheapest solicitor. Remember that your solicitor is going to take care of a lot of the legal matters. And when purchasing a home, the process is only as fast as the slowest person. So you don't want your solicitor or your broker making the deal or the process take longer, because as we say in the industry, time kills deals. So the longer something takes, the more likely it is to fall through, keeping in mind that about 50% of mortgages don't go through anyway, either because the seller pulls out, the lender pulls out, or somebody pulls out of that deal. So the process is not a 100% process to begin with. So having a slow solicitor or a slow broker is just going to increase the probability or possibility that the deal does not complete. There are several key stages to getting a mortgage. Stage number one is when you speak to your broker and you're going to have a conversation about your finances. They're going to get an understanding of who you are, what you're looking for, and how to best meet your needs. Now, an FCA regulated broker is going to give you advice and give you information. It's not always going to be what you want to hear, but they are going to do their best sometimes to protect you from yourself. So find a good broker that you can trust, someone that's going to give you the best advice. They'll do that initial assessment with a view of getting you what's called an agreement in principle. Some people call it a decision in principle, a mortgage in principle. Essentially, it's a cursory overview of your situation being put to a bank or a lender to see if, based on that cursory information, that bank would offer you a mortgage. A lot of estate agents and a lot of sellers will require that you have an agreement in principle in order to make an offer. So once you have that agreement in principle, you can go out, search for a property with a level of confidence that you'll be able to borrow the amount that you need for that property. Once you found the property, you will then be moving into what's called the full mortgage application, keeping in mind that the agreement in principle is essentially about you as the buyer, whereas the full mortgage application is going to take into account the actual property. So you might find that you have been offered an agreement in principle, but the lender may not lend on that specific property. Once the offer has been accepted, they will initiate evaluation. This is where the lender is saying, well, I know the seller thinks that the house is worth this much, and you think that the house is worth this much, but we're the one putting up the money. We're putting up the money, so we need to assess how much we think it is worth. So remember, that's a valuation and it's not a survey. So it's the bank saying, this is how much we think that property is worth. Then the legal stuff happens. That's why it's important that you have your solicitor in place well in advance, that when you get to the stage where the solicitor is involved, you don't just start your search for solicitors. Then you go to exchange of contracts and then completion. Because let's just be honest, you don't want a mortgage, you want a home. Getting a mortgage and speaking to a mortgage broker is a necessary part of the process, but ultimately you're trying to get keys to your new home. A few things that you can do to get the very best price. I offer a free negotiation service, and I know a lot of other brokers do that as well. The benefit of having your broker negotiate the deal for you is that the broker does this all day, every day. So more likely than not, they'll be able to negotiate a deal better than you would be able to. Also, they may identify things that might be problematic when you get to the point of completing a full mortgage application. As the buyer, you do want to try to ascertain the reason for the sale, but don't get emotional. Men, don't allow your wife to get so emotionally tied into the property that when you're negotiating, you're giving away the farm. All right. So you do want to make sure it's a place that your family wants to be, that you are happy to wake up and go to work to pay that mortgage, but don't get so emotionally tied in that you are unable to negotiate the very best deal. A few things to stop, start, and continue. So stop applying for credit once you start the process. I've seen people get an agreement in principle, then between the agreement in principle and finding the property, they go out and take out a £10,000 loan, and then it knocks out the affordability. So stop applying for credit, stop getting those searches, start paying off small balances. So if you have small balances that you can pay off, pay them off. Sometimes a little bit smaller deposit is better than having outgoings that is impacting your affordability. And don't forget that the deposit does not come out of your account until pretty late in the process. So continue saving. And if you can, go on Money Saving Supermarket, find a high interest savings account, because you're not going to need the money right away. You may be able to earn some additional interest on that money while you're waiting to pay out the deposit. Don't forget about additional expenses, especially if you've been living at home and not had the responsibility of having your own home. Don't forget that when you purchase your own home, you're responsible for everything. So don't forget about stamp duty, legal fees, moving costs, protection or insurance, and potential repairs and renovations. Most people are going to exhaust most of their savings when they purchase a property. So if your boiler breaks, if the roof falls in, things that could happen, make sure that you have those things. Make sure that you're considering those things. I want to bring in a very special guest who will be talking about an in-person mortgage event that's happening very soon. So it's great getting advice from people online or being in WhatsApp group, but what you really need sometimes is someone that you can speak to face to face. So we're having a mortgage masterclass, and I'm going to bring in my special guest who can introduce herself. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Anthony. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and the upcoming event.
Sure thing. So I've been a broker for the last, 10 years plus, but I've been working in financial services like yourself for just over a couple of decades, maybe not as much as 30 years, but close, really, really getting close. I've always been passionate about making sure people get to fulfill their dreams and getting onto the property ladder. So I've worked for large corporates. You always start in banking at some point, get trained to be a proper advisor, I say. So I worked for HSBC, I worked for Nationwide, and then I went into estate agencies as well. So I've got a good understanding of how the mortgage process works. And then I've worked for new builds, the new build the new build group. So there's quite an extensive amount of experience I've got. So when it comes to mortgages, I'm pretty much, I've been in every seat a mortgage broker has to be in, because you find some people go from corporate straight to brokerage. I've done all the bits in between, estate agency, new build specialists, and then the brokerage side of things. So that's me as career-wise. Personal life, I am a mom. I've got a busy home life, work-life balance, and that's probably why I became a broker, so I could control my hours of work. I'm very passionate about empowering the youth and making sure that working moms like myself can also be represented in the corporate and professional life. So that's who I am, really.
You said a few things that we'll unpack as we continue with the conversation. And don't forget, for those people that are in the chat, put your questions in the chat and we will answer them. Now, I like what you said about being a working mom and that being one of the reasons why you became a broker. If anyone's familiar with the hierarchy of needs, right? So shelter is one of the base needs that a human being has. And I moved into the brokerage side of things because I realized how important getting someone a new home is, and how important and how that impacts someone's life. It's going to determine the friends that your kids have and the people that you're around. So you were talking about the being a working mom and the work-life balance. How have you found it so far? And I know you've been doing the brokerage for a while, but how have you found just managing the two things?
To be honest, it's like juggling a lot of plates. And financial services as an industry is quite high pressured. It's very male dominated, and it's very white male dominated, to say the least. So it's been a challenge trying to make a mark and still be able to, come home and wear a smile and remain feminine. So it's been a challenge, but you kind of find your stride, and it's the passion that drives me to be sitting in this chair as a broker. Because like yourself, Anthony, I believe the mortgage industry is very underrated. Everybody lives in a home somewhere, whether it's rented or bought, or with family or friends. It's your home. It's where you do your personal stuff. You get to be vulnerable. You get to be happy. You get to be everything that is human related in that space. So getting it secured for somebody and giving them that chance in their lifetime to actually own a piece of real estate is what really keeps me going. So whatever challenges I've faced kind of just wade away when I get a customer's getting their offer and they get to completion, they get their keys. Because like you mentioned earlier on, 50% of the deals don't actually go through. So when it does happen, you get that, achievement as a broker to say, you know what, this is actually worth it. It's not a job, it's a vocation. So that's how I've coped, and the number of years and the smile and the children still running around in the background.
One of the things that I didn't realize, and even being in banking as long as I have been, is the importance of a broker. So this is very important to all you first time buyers and anyone that's watching that by default feels I'm going to go to my bank. The reason why you want to go to a banker is one of the things that we've just been discussing. The reason why you want to go to a broker is the fact that we've been discussing the background of a lot of brokers. So I find that a lot of brokers didn't just start as brokers. They've gone through retail banking or commercial banking. So there's a breadth of information and knowledge and wisdom that they bring to the entire process. I love working with first time buyers. So I specialize in working with first time buyers and specifically those who feel that they could not get a mortgage because they believe the lie, which is you cannot get on the property ladder. In my experience, it's not so much that people can't get on the property ladder. Quite often, they can't get on at the step that they want to get on. So what I mean by that is you have a lot of young people who maybe don't have the discipline to save money, and they want to buy their first home in zone 1 or zone 2, 3-bedroom Victorian. Now, I may not be able to get you a mortgage for that, but maybe I can get you in zone 4 in a terraced house. Or maybe I can get you in zone 4 in a property that maybe needs a little bit fixing up. So it may not be your forever home, but we can get you a mortgage 9 times out of 10. Have you found that to be a similar experience?
Absolutely. And funny enough, it's not just the first time buyers that have got high hopes and goals and ambitions to live in little mini castles. It's pretty much anyone who wants to buy a house. They always go for the top end of their budget. Nobody ever comes to me with a conservative to say, oh, I want to spend, as little as possible. I want to be cautious. They always come in with big dreams. So my area of specialty in the mortgage field is people that have been told no. So the whole breadth, first-time buyers, remortgages, people that recently moved to the country, so seen as foreign nationals, the elderly people as well, people that want to buy for investment. I just like helping people that have been told no, because I think there's a lot of experience and a lot of information that isn't being shared. And to be fair, some lenders actually haven't got the not some, I think most of the lenders haven't got the time to educate people when they've been declined. You're just told, go look at your credit report, try again in 6 months. So this is the reason why we should come to brokers, because we give you a reason as to what's gone wrong, how to unpack it, and how to tailor a journey that allows you to buy a suitable property for your budget and your circumstances at that time, which people don't understand, that the bank doesn't have the appetite to have a relationship with you to that level. It either works or not.
Okay, so I'm going to push back on a couple of things, and I'm
Yeah.
going to explore a couple of concepts that you said. Now, I totally agree with what you're saying about the bank. So about 20 years ago, 20 to 25 years ago, about 15% of all mortgages were done through brokers or intermediaries. Now it's the other way around. About 75 to 80% of mortgages are done through brokers. Now, where I will 100% push back, and I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just pushing back from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I am an AI geek. I am a reader. I'm a person that consumes a lot of information. I don't think that there's any lack of access to information. I don't think that there's a lack of access. I just think we're now in an era where there's this thing called the unread library phenomenon, where people have access to so much information that they quite often just ignore the information that they have access to. Keep in mind, you can pick up your phone now and ask your phone any question about anything and get the answer. So I want you to convince me that there is a lack of information or access of information and financial literacy.
Well, I love that, because that's where I come in right on T. I've been doing financial literacy now for the last 5 years, and I've got one of the people on the flyer at the event, Tenda Indoro. She actually has got a financial literacy workshop, a whole school that she started called Understanding Money, addressing this very thing, the lack of knowledge or information. So I think you're right in saying that the data is all there, but people don't know what they don't know. They don't know what to access because they haven't got the slightest or the faintest idea where to start. Not because it's not there, but they just haven't got that confidence to step into it. So for that reason, the information becomes inaccessible. So it looks like it's not there. It's there, but are they asking the right questions? Do they know what they're looking for? And like you said at the start, I mean, a bit earlier on, people come to you wanting to buy in zone 2, zone 1. But have they actually sat there and thought, what is zone 1? What are the prices for that area? Does it fit? So all that information is there, but they don't know that, because they could simply find out, I earn 30,000. I want to buy a house in, I don't know, Camden, for example. That would completely do the sums for them, and they can find that out. But people don't. So it's just the disconnect. And I think there's not enough done to educate people, to kind of say, look here, this is what it is. These are the things you need to be finding out. For example, credit history. Everybody knows of a credit report. 99% of adults have heard of credit at some point in their life. But how many of them actually look after it or have the information of how to understand to keep that relationship? So information is out there, but are people understanding it? Do they know what to ask and how to access it? Sorry, I can't hear you now, Anthony. I'm not sure what's happened to the sound.
I was on mute.
Great.
I'm glad you said that, because that's one of the important reasons why events such as the Mortgage Masterclass are vital, and the promotion and marketing behind those things. Because as I said, I'm no longer in a space of giving people excuses, because in talking to people, I quite often find that it's that they don't want to know. So there's a level of ignorance is bliss. So I'm excited about the level of energy that you're putting into inviting people to the mortgage mastery class. So tell us a little bit about the class or the workshop and how people can get involved.
Fantastic. So it's come about because there's been a lot of events around property, scaling up, building your portfolio as landlords, but not much about just the basic product, the mortgage. Maybe because it's a regulated product and not everybody can speak on it. As you know, Anthony, it's not somebody who's bought a few properties that can come and talk of mortgages. So that's why the panel, if you look at it, everybody there who's a panelist and speaking is a regulated advisor. So as much as we're not giving advice at this workshop, we're just going to educate the people on this product. And I love your book, by the way, that says a mortgage is just a big loan. That just kind of breaks it down. And when I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, somebody else gets it. People need to understand what this product is. There's a lot of misconception about the product itself. So the masterclass was born out of that, to say people need to have information, understand the process, what it actually means to have one, to be responsible for it, because as you know, if you don't keep up your repayments, your home may be repossessed. So having people educated enough to understand what this thing actually is. Because funny enough, people will tell you about car finance, a personal loan. They'll tell you all sorts about credit cards. When it comes to mortgages, it's one of those, I don't really know. And this is why this was brought to the community. And I'm really passionate because it's the first we're actually having a product masterclass. I've had people saying to me, why the cost? So I said to them, look at the flyer. Between myself, Anthony, Natasha, Tendai, we have over 100 years of experience in this industry. So that is a start. And it's happening over a 7-hour period. So if you were to divide that into the cost of coming in and the access of information you're going to have, it's really not even. You cannot equate it. It's priceless, because I know how busy everybody on that panel is. And it's a miracle that everybody came together and agreed on that date. Because I think Natasha's off to America, you're promoting a book, Tenda is preparing for Understanding Money, and we're all doing our own thing. So I think people should take advantage of having such experience in a room, a whole afternoon with access to us. So it's not just we sitting there talking at them, it's a panel. So they get to ask questions. How beautiful is that? They can get to ask anything mortgages. I mean, I've never had a seminar like this. People come, they're presented at, and then they go home. At this time, we're saying, come, we present, and then we sit on a panel, all 4 of us, and people ask away. I mean, wow, that's going to be mind-blowing. And over and above that, they're going to have a chance to speak to the panelists one-on-one and purchase books. So you can walk away with your book from Understanding Money. You can walk away with your book about how a mortgage is a big loan. It's such a wealth of opportunity to come together. And I don't want people to miss this. And there's also free lunch and there's refreshments involved. But honestly speaking, for our community and for everybody else who's even determined to even think of mortgages, whether you're a first-time buyer, existing homeowner, house landlord, big portfolio holder, this is our time. And with all the changes that are happening, this is the time to engage with not just brokers that have 2 years and they're still wet under the noses. These are people who are award winners, authors, and very, very highly regarded in the community. So I'm excited to work along this panel and see what is going to be born for future events as well.
I'm equally as excited, not just because I'm involved, but because I think that these forums where you have a panel are very powerful, because quite often people won't ask a question, but being in an environment where we're telling people, listen, we don't expect you to have the answers, which is why you're here. You spoke about credit scores, and you talked about credit reports. And I just find that this is one of the most misunderstood areas of finance, simply because most people, even a lot of financial professionals, don't understand how credit reports work. So I spent about 10 years of my life doing pre-litigation for HSBC and doing collections for Capital One. And I would say that I probably understand credit better than most people. One of the things that I do find is, as parents, we often give the wrong information to our young people because we don't understand, because we don't know any better either. So a quick tip with your credit: when you have a young person, don't just say don't get a credit card, because not having a credit profile in some ways is as bad as having bad credit. So a better way of dealing with it is to tell the young person, or teach them how to be responsible. Teach them how to manage their credit and help them understand the differences between revolving credit and installment credit. And maybe you'll need to do some research as a parent. But the misconception and a lot of the bad information that people have about finance and specifically credit comes from a level of ignorance that we have, that we then pass on to other people. I'm going to ask you a question. What would you say are the top 3 tips that you would give to anyone looking to get a mortgage?
Wow, just 3. The first one would be, have a look at your credit report or credit score and, well, engage with it for starters. That's the first one. Approach a broker with your credit report and get a tailored journey to where you need to get to. And the third thing is, don't be afraid to ask questions. Use the expertise around. Gone are the days where you just sit there and not know because you don't know. There's no reason to not know. I'm just going to also touch on what you said about young people. The actual event is saying bring a young person between the age of 13 and 21 for free, for this very reason, Anthony, that people don't understand, and then that's passed down to children. So it's generational poverty. So my focus and my USP, my passion as a mom and as a Black woman, is to empower the next generation as well. So I've deliberately said, bring your young person to this event, because sometimes parents struggle to speak to the young person about finance because they probably don't understand themselves, or they haven't got that level of connection, which sounds really strange, but this happens a lot. So bring your young person to people that they can speak to in confidence. And I always say this in all the talks I've been invited to. As parents, we teach our children how to make the bed, brush your teeth, how to make a sandwich, but we never talk to our children about finances. And yet they're expected to grow up, get a job or a vacation of some sort, earn an income, and know what to do with it. And yet this discussion has never happened. But they can, very well make a bed, very well make a cup of coffee. But those are not real life skills without understanding and financial literacy and that educational piece of what is money, what can you do with money, good credit, bad credit, decisions around money. And I always pose in every seminar to families to say, look, we're coming up to April. Everybody knows what happens in April, isn't it? We've all been chatting about it. There are a few budgets in the year, but the end of year, is the big one. And every adult knows this. And then I've paused and said, do you have a budget in your own home? When do you set the budget for your home? People just glide in, year out, and they wait for the exchequer to come in with the little bag and tell them what to do with their money. At the granular level in the home, how are you having these discussions on the dinner table? As spouses, as families, do you have a budget? Do you have a purpose of goals and dreams to achieve that year, which then brings the mortgage in? Because if you haven't got a plan, we all know what they say: you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah, and I think that's a solid point about parents and their reluctance, or just the fact that they don't think about having those things in place and those discussions in place. I would say that as someone who has observed from different lenses and from different positions around finance, it often comes down to us duplicating or rebelling against what we were taught. So I grew up with my grandmother. My grandmother was amazing with money. My grandmother was one of those people who just knew how to manage money. And because of that, I sometimes rebelled against the things that she was telling me around savings and around just being disciplined. So in my case, it wasn't a fact that I didn't have access to the information. It's just, I just didn't want to hear it. And I recall when I started working, my grandmother would say, "Oh, you're a man, you're working, you have to bring some money home." And I resented it. I really didn't like the fact that she was stealing my money. But then when I got a little bit older and my uncle and I were going to get an apartment, she had saved that money up. So we were able to use that money towards getting that new place. Now, I say this because I've talked to several people recently where their parents and they are trying to talk to their young people or young adults. And when I say young, I'm in my 50s, so I'm talking about 35, right? And the person that's 35 saying, "Oh, I'm not going to purchase this property with you, Mom, because I'm going to want to buy a house sometime." But they haven't done the things that they need to do to buy that house, right? My point is this: we need to start having conversations around generational wealth. And generational wealth is about planning. So having the plan in place, estate planning, having a will, having things and conversations that are drawing generational wealth into one pot. Quite often, I find it's a Western thing. It's this thing that everybody wants to be independent. So you'll have the young person, and now I'm talking about in their 20s, and they could stay at home. They could stay at home, save money towards a home, but they want to be independent.
Yeah.
It's about having that conversation and saying, "Listen, all right, why don't we do this? We buy something together, young person. We build some equity in it to a point that you can take some equity out and then you can buy something with a bigger deposit." Yeah. But we don't do that. And I think that it's easy to point the finger at other communities and say, "Oh, well, they have all the wealth and they have all the wealth." But we need to start taking accountability for the information we have now. So top tip, guys, if you are a young person, don't be in a rush to move out of your parents' home if you're welcome and you're safe and you're comfortable there. But don't waste the money that you could be saving while you are there. And I know as a mother, you probably have some things to add.
I absolutely do. I mean, my friends have got children the same age as mine, and they've started to buy property for their children going off to university, talking of life insurances, protection, wills, and that sort of thing, because gone are the days where you just grow up and you leave the house and you just get on with it. There's a lot of things that are befalling younger people than they were maybe 50 years ago. The responsibilities are quite there, and by the time they start families, they need to be financially stable. So I would pretty much back what you've said. And this conference, again, we've got the likes of Tendai, who specialize in wealth management. And wealth planning. And I know, Anthony, that if you've worked for HSBC, you know exactly what that means. It's ingrained in all the people that have gone through the HSBC doors as advisors or brokers, where you do the whole full 360. Yeah. You don't just do one product. You look at protecting it, you look at wills, you look at pension, you look at estate planning, you look at the whole 360. And that, for me, when I started at HSBC when I was just about 25, I thought that was the most annoying thing, because I had to pass all the other data I captured to a financial planning manager or a premier wealth manager or everybody else, and I didn't understand how it was my business. But I've come to understand that now it's such a powerful tool when you're having these discussions, because you have a good transaction. And young people also like to talk about their future. Funny enough, they don't want to just talk about a mortgage. But if you talk to a young person about, look, if you start now at 21, 22, 23, you could potentially retire at 40. And they're like, oh, wow. You start to open up their perception of what the future looks like. And they want to work towards not working as long as their parents or grandparents have had, because they didn't have insights. So it's really, really key that our younger generation and the young people are empowered, and we create this generational wealth it's got to start from somewhere. And there's no point comparing communities. You're absolutely right. We're taking responsibility. And this particular event is to empower our people, and not just people of color, but anybody who wants to be empowered. It's everybody's welcome. And the panel is made up. I keep saying this. I am in awe because I watch you when you do your presentations, Anthony. I watch Natasha. I watch Tendai. I'm very, very humbled that all of you accepted this invitation. You know, you took this seriously. I would have never, in my wildest dreams, thought I could ever have any of you, yet alone all of you, at an event. So I'm ever so grateful. And I want the public to see why this is such a powerful thing to have. And long may it live.
Yeah, and the passion from all of us and the skill and expertise. You've said a couple of words that I know trigger people. So one of the things you talked about was estate planning and wills, and please, people, get this out of your mind. Wills are not for rich people. Estate planning is not for rich people. All of these things are for anybody who is breathing. So we quite often talk about wills as, oh, well, you know, it's about stuff. A will is not just about stuff. A will is about making sure that what your wishes are enforceable. So everyone should have a will. And I know most people know they need a will, but quite often they never get around to having a will. And also look at it like this. We just have this thing. And I don't understand how people don't see the hypocrisy on the mindset that we all have. We root for an underdog. We root for people to build wealth. We root for people to, you know, be these unicorn startups. So let's just say I'm the unicorn startup. I start this company from scratch and I work my way up and I built a level of wealth. And then my children inherit that wealth. We then have a resentment for people who are born with a silver spoon in their mouth. How does that work? Like I worked in the music industry for a lot of my life. And I see these people, these rappers who literally came from nothing. Their kids are growing up in the lap of luxury and quite often almost are embarrassed to say, yeah, I grew up in an 8-room mansion. So let's get these mindsets straight that we want to be the person that changes the path of our lineage. I want to be that person, but I also don't want someone despising my children and grandchildren because I made those sacrifices. That yes, they could be born with a silver spoon in their mouth and a trust fund and all of that stuff. I think some of the challenges that we can face sometimes is because our mindset is one of poverty. We then resent people who have stuff instead of learning, instead of aligning ourselves with people that are doing the right things or doing things to build wealth. Let's look at the discipline they have. Let's look at the sacrifices that they have, that they make. Let's look at the delayed gratification. One of the things that we used to talk about in New York when I was growing up, you'd be driving by the products and see Escalades and all these really expensive cars in front of the projects. Do you really need that expensive car while you're renting? So let's get our mindset right. And at this event, let's have those conversations and let's make sure people are asking questions that are going to move them forward and not just questions around what the government is doing to mess them over and what this community has done over the past decades to build wealth. Let's talk about what we can do as individuals to move ourselves forward.
Absolutely. And you're spot on. I don't know if you've noticed that we have a moderator who's Muzi. Muzi is a property expert. He just does property on another level. And he's been slotted into this because of what you've just explained there, Anthony. He gives people the opportunity to think of property as a wealth creation tool, rather than just my home. I live in a house, I bought a house. He puts those nuggets in people's heads to say, look, you can do this, you can do that, and you've got so many things you can do with the property. And I think, unfortunately, people are kind of small-minded sometimes. They think, I buy a house, I live in it, that's it. There's so much else that can be done. Of course, there are other financial instruments that you can invest in, but this is about mortgages and the mortgage masterclass. And I've been in financial services for a long time, and I've seen people buying massive mansions on the back of having started off small and building their way up. So it can be done. I'm from Zimbabwe, where I am. If you have a big house, you must be very, very rich. And people come here, they immigrate here like myself, because I moved to the UK when I was an adult, a young adult. And there's always this perception that I'll go back home and I'll have my beautiful house there. I'll have comfort there. Here I will rent and live in the smallest possible apartment or space, save as much money and put that wealth back home, and then I retire there. But that's not been the reality for most people. People are aging here, people are actually dying before they go home, and people have been stolen, properties have been taken off of them by family. Because if you have an uncle back home who's living in a 6-story building, whatever it is, an 8-bedroom mansion, and then you tell them you're moving back, they're not going to want you back because they've had children, then raised them in that house. They don't want to move to a 1-bed cottage, which is probably what they can afford. They would rather get rid of you, Anthony, before you can even land at the airport. Because you've been here for 20 years. They've got a community around them and they live in this beautiful house that you've built. So I'm saying to people, where you are is where you have your home. It's all good and fair that you've got plans elsewhere, but start where you are. Start thinking wealth where you are. And the good thing about property prices in the UK, touch wood, they generally do go up. So you can always get the equity out at some point when you retire, and you can go wherever you want. I'll share a story of a man who's in his 70s now. He came when he was a young man in his 20s. He didn't do anything back home. He was enjoying his life. He didn't buy a property here. And there's nothing for him to go to back home.
Yeah.
And he can't work anymore here because he's too old to work. He used to work in the industry, forklifts and stuff. So he's too old to do that now. And he cannot qualify to get council accommodation. He's on a waiting list. He's had to move in with his children, and he's now a burden. And I'm thinking that's the majority of people in my generation, in my background. We are going to become burdens in our later life. Because to be fair, who's going to want to look after you back in Africa? They like you when you send things, but when I'm a 60-year-old lady or 70-year-old grandma, they're not going to want me there. And I probably won't fit in because my community is here now. Yeah. So let's build the wealth where we are and have choices in the future.
One of the key things that we've talked about throughout this whole conversation is mindsets. Yeah. Your mindset is going to determine your trajectory. So it's about making sure that we're keeping ourselves informed. We don't have a mentality of being a victim. Yeah. We don't always gravitate to people that are complaining. We want to surround ourselves with people like Muzzy. I met Muzzy at an event, and he's one of the people I admire the most because when he's talking about property strategies, he's very upfront and very honest, saying it's not something that's a get-rich-quick scheme. So we need to get out of the get-rich-quick scheme mentality. We also need to start attending events like this, making the investment, an £80 investment that's going to save you tens of thousands in the future is worth doing. We spend more than that on silly things. So let's make sure that we're addressing our mindsets. Let's make sure that we're having a mindset of victors and wealth builders, and not just material wealth, but wealth through the legacy that we're going to leave for our future generations. Now, as we wrap up, I just want you to just give 2 quick tips for anyone who is planning on buying a property within the next 6 months.
Wow. Well, firstly, you've missed the stamp duty holiday. So the biggest tip is understand the changes that have come. That's my first number 1 tip, because there's a few things that have shifted around stamp duty and what you can or can't get discounts on. So have a good understanding of that so you can do your budgets well. Second tip is do not compete with anyone. As Anthony said at the start, you always buy what's affordable to you. So run your own race. There's a lot of time, especially when you're a young person, to get onto the property ladder. Step on the right step on the ladder. Don't go right to the top, because if you fall from there, you're going to have a serious hurt or break a bone or two. So start where you can based on your income, your credit, and your deposit. So SID, I think it's credit, income, and deposit, like you put it. So those are the 2 top tips. understand the changes that have come, so your budget is right, and then make sure that you're stepping on the ladder at your level. The ladder's got many steps. Don't jump to the first. The first at the right at the top. Don't jump in the middle. Step where your feet can land comfortably.
All right. Well, thank you so much for everyone.
You've gone on mute.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you still.
Okay.
I can hear you now, yes.
All right. Well, thank you for everyone who has joined us. And we are going to wrap up now. Let me just show myself. Can you still hear me?
No, I've lost sound. Not sure what's happened as we're
All right. Well, thank you for everyone who joined us this evening. As I said, the next steps would be to get an agreement in principle. You also then want to start house hunting, and don't forget to tell a friend. I have a new book out. It's called A Mortgage is a Really Big Loan. You can get your copy on Amazon. And thank you for joining us. And we do our mortgage property chats pretty much every month on the first and second Wednesday of each month. And we always like your questions, and we have some very interesting guests. So make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Loan to valuation is the difference between what the bank is lending you and the price of the property. So let's just say you live somewhere where you can get a property for $100,000. If you pay down $25,000, that would be a 25% deposit. The bank would only be lending you $75,000. So that would make the loan to valuation 75%. So if you do not have a UK passport, it's probably going to be difficult for you to be able to qualify for a 5% deposit, but it's not impossible. So what you'd really be looking at realistically is anywhere between a 10% deposit and a 15% deposit. But 5% deposits do exist, and if you need one, I can help you out. So make sure that you look at the information in the description, contact me, and we can go through your personal circumstances. But just to manage your expectation, the 5% deposits are going to be more difficult to find. So what changes everything? If you are on a skilled worker visa, here are a few things